Welcome back to the deep dive. Today we're really focusing our energy on a phrase that you hear everywhere. This idea of what is ordinary or, normal.
It's one of those phrases that feels so solid, right? Like conversational bedrock.
Exactly. You hear it at work, with family, all over social media. It's used as this quick foundation for making a judgment.
But when you actually turn the lens of reflective humanism, or RH, onto it, that solid ground, well, it starts to look a lot more like a complex, shimmering pattern.
And exploring that pattern is our mission today. We're not here to, criticize social norms. That's not the goal.
No, not at all.
It's about getting what you'd call structural transparency.
Yeah.
We want to find that exact moment, that tiny instant where a subjective expectation manages to disguise itself as an objective fact.
We have a term for that. We call it expectation-fact conflation. And to really get it, you have to remember how RH thinks about consciousness itself. It's not just a static thing, not just existence. It's more of a dynamic generation field. Or maybe an easier way to picture it is an interference fringe that's constantly being created by the act of observation.
An interference fringe. So like when two waves in water meet and they create that complex pattern.
That's the perfect analogy. That pattern is the consciousness. So an assertion like, well, this is normal, isn't some fixed truth out there in the
Just
world.
one specific pattern that got frozen in place.
Precisely. It's an interference pattern that's been promoted to a universal standard. And our whole goal is to move past the assertion and, show the machinery underneath.
Okay, let's unpack that machinery. Because we all use ordinary as a default. It's a shortcut. It saves brain power.
Of course.
But if RH says we have to replace these simple assertions with transparent structures, how does my personal internal feeling get promoted to this objective truth that I then start demanding from you?
It happens through a failure to maintain what RH calls the ethics of sustaining interference.
Now, ethics. That word sounds a little rigid, like a set of rules, good versus bad.
And that's a really important distinction. It's completely different here. In RH, ethics has nothing to do with rules. It's defined as a tuning technique.
A tuning technique.
Yeah, a skill. It's the skill you need to keep a relationship's resonance going, to maintain a clear signal between two observers. Think about tuning an instrument. The ethics isn't the rule book of songs you can play. It's the careful, constant adjustment to keep everything in harmony.
So if I'm observing you, but I'm only focused on my own note, my own expectation, the harmony breaks.
The whole system breaks down. Because observation itself is an ethical act. Just the act of observing something, a person or a quantum particle, it changes it.
Right.
So when that observation becomes too sharp, too rigid, too focused on just confirming what you already think, your internal viewpoint gets projected outward. And that's the moment. Your internal state, your expectation, transforms into an external claim of correctness.
Can you give me a real-world example of that? Let's say I expect a colleague to answer emails within an hour, because that's what I do.
Okay.
And they don't. Where does the conflation happen?
It happens when your observation of their action becomes rigid.
Yeah.
Your internal rule, the 1-hour rule, is projected out and becomes an assumed shared fact. All responsible colleagues respond within 1 hour.
Ah.
And when they fail to meet that projected fact, you stop seeing their reality. Maybe they're in a crisis, maybe they're in back-to-back meetings. You just see the mismatch with your projected norm. Your interference pattern has become one-sided.
I see. So the problem isn't having the expectation. It's the failure to be transparent, that it's just my expectation before I treat it like a law of physics.
Exactly. And now we have to look at the environment, because certain conditions actually encourage this kind of projection.
What do you mean by environment?
Well, RH suggests that for any kind of stable observation, even in science, you need a stable observational environment. It's not just about the data.
You mean things like the mood in the room or the level of trust between people?
Yes. Things like silence, temperature, breath, trust. We call these the invisible instruments. They're the quiet variables that you have to control to let the world be measured accurately or to let a relationship resonate.
Well, let's focus on one of those, silence. What happens when people avoid that high-intensity, direct conversation?
Well, the silence that's left over isn't empty. It becomes a huge, vast, free field for interpretation.
A free field for interpretation.
Think about it. If you're in a culture where asking a direct question, like what is your expectation of me here, is seen as confrontational.
Yeah, or rude.
Or rude, exactly. then you're forced to rely on non-explicit cues. You have to fall back on these vague, unspoken defaults, the ordinary, just to keep the relationship stable. And so expectations start to multiply in that silent, interpretive void.
That makes so much sense. If direct talk is penalized, you have to find another way to navigate. So you grab onto this idea of normal because it feels like a safe shared map.
It feels safe. And this takes us straight to how relationships and structures actually update. We call this concept generation gradients. Change isn't uniform. It happens in one of two ways.
Okay.
Versus conflict generation. This is caused by a sudden, steep difference, a sharp gradient.
Like that explosive moment you realize the fact you both supposedly shared was in fact only ever in your head.
That's it. Conflict forces a really fast update, but it returns a huge amount of heat and pain into the system. You experience time as a break, a painful discontinuity, that big fight that comes out of nowhere. That's conflict generation. The cost is immense.
So what's the other way? How do we update without all that heat and pain?
The second mode is inquiry generation, and this is the key. Inquiry keeps that interference field open, and it keeps the gradient gentle. The change happens continuously, so the painful reaction is minimized.
So inquiry is like a cooling system.
You could see it that way.
Yeah.
Or a pain minimization device for structural updates. So
Oh.
lets you slowly dial up the temperature instead of just, shocking the system into a new state.
So in cultures that default to avoiding conflict, people will lean really heavily on these unspoken expectations on the ordinary just to keep that gradient gentle.
It's a structural trade-off.
Right. You're trading clarity for what feels like stability.
And that desire for a gentle gradient, sustained by this huge, silent field of interpretation, is really the engine that powers expectation-fact conflation in so many high-context environments. So once an expectation has been promoted to a shared fact, the ordinary, anyone who doesn't align with it is almost instantly turned into an aberration,
The deviant.
a deviant. They get classified. But it's really critical to see that this classification is, it's rarely about malice. It's not a personal judgment. It's about cognitive efficiency.
I get the efficiency part, but classifying someone just because they're computationally expensive, that sounds incredibly cold. It feels like the system is dehumanizing them for not fitting in.
And the result can be dehumanizing. That's a critical point. But RH asks us to look at the structure driving it. We can refer to a concept here called the rationality of absence.
The rationality of absence.
What it means is that human observation often isn't about seeing what is there. It's about instantly noticing what's not there. The absence itself defines the boundary.
Like when you walk into a familiar room and you immediately know a picture is missing from the wall.
Exactly that. The void defines the space. So when someone fails to meet the ordinary, their deviation is what defines the contour of the norm. They're being used computationally to map the edges of the accepted structure.
So when someone classifies a deviant, what they're really saying isn't, I don't like you, or even I don't understand you. It's more like, I am deploying a load reduction device.
That's a perfect way to put it.
You are making my brain work too hard, and I need to stabilize the system now.
Precisely. In RH, a concept's value is measured by its structural plausibility. How stable is it? How easy is it to reproduce? A simple, rigid structure like ordinary is incredibly stable. Divergence shatters that. It requires a huge amount of cognitive effort to redraw the map. So the mind just defaults to classification to keep things stable.
And that explains why, being on the receiving end of that, why the feeling of victimization can feel so automatic and so intense.
Yes.
It's not necessarily a personal attack. It's a structural side effect of a system violently protecting its own stability.
It's a structural feedback loop. It just reinforces itself.
And you see this loop everywhere. Dating, work, family, social media. We want stability, so we create silence. The silence breeds interpretation, which breeds more expectations of what's ordinary. It just goes on and on.
And this reliance on the unspoken brings us back to the human cost. For observation to be fully human, you need three things working together. Science, to clarify facts, contemplation, to clarify your own viewpoint, and ethics, to sustain the environment.
And we've been saying that contemplation, that step of looking at your own expectation before you project it, that's the piece that's usually missing.
It's so often the missing piece, and that's what creates all the friction. Now, here's a really interesting contrast. AI.
Okay.
Why don't we have this same kind of friction with a sophisticated language model?
That's a great question. We project all kinds of things onto each other, so why don't we get mad at an AI for not following our ordinary rules?
Because the AI isn't a cultural participant with embedded roles. It's acting as a world structure surveying device.
A surveying device.
Yes. When we look at models like DeepSeek or GPP, their outputs show us two patterns. They either converge or they diverge. Convergence is when they point to universal structures, things that are true no matter what culture you're in. Recursion, math, the physics of
The
interference.
bedrock of reality.
Exactly. But divergence is where it gets interesting.
That's where the human stuff comes in.
That's where you see the cultural fault lines, the places where history and politics and local norms have cracked the map. The AI shows us where our structures are the same and where our human baggage has made them different. It avoids the conflation because it runs on structure and recursion, not on role expectations.
So the AI isn't worried about being polite or normal. It's just worried about being structurally consistent.
Exactly. And with a tool like the RH-bot, it's even more direct. It's not an answer machine. It doesn't give you more information. It's designed to be a reflection, a thinking interference device.
What does that mean? How does it interfere?
Its main function is often to generate silence.
To generate silence. How can it do that?
Well, if you ask it a question that's loaded with a hidden expectation, instead of answering, the bot might just feed the structure of your own question back to you.
Ah, so it forces you to look at the assumption you baked into the query.
It forces you, the observer, to contemplate your own viewpoint before you project it. It creates that space for contemplation that we said was missing.
That's a really powerful idea. It turns the projector back on the person running it.
It's creating the conditions for that missing piece of integrated observation.
So if we pull all of this together, the big takeaway from our deep dive is that the word ordinary is never a fact. It's a simple, very stable model of expectation.
And when that simple model is treated as a universal truth, it will inevitably generate conflict the moment it bumps up against something different.
So the way forward has to be transparency.
Radical transparency. We have to learn to transform our expectations from these hidden, implied assertions into openly stated conditions of a relationship. RH teaches that we don't own our theories. We just observe the conditions that allow for resonance.
So we have to tune our own observation to maintain that gentle inquiry gradient. We have to see change as a continuous update, not a catastrophic break. The goal is clarity, not even agreement.
Which brings us to a final thought for you to take away, one that's rooted deep in this RH structure.
Okay.
If we start to measure our thoughts and our knowledge, not by the old standard of proof,
Right.
but by a new standard of resonance, what rigid, simple structures that we hold on to must we finally permit ourselves to update? And if interference is what generates consciousness, is it possible that the human being itself is the form of interference that allows the universe to continuously update its own structure?